Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's been said that if you want to have a very positive, joyful life, you need to practice self-care. Take care of yourself. Lots of different ways to do that. One of them is setting up boundaries. I'm putting that under the category of self-care because self-care isn't just about getting massages and going for walks. Putting up boundaries around your life. What's that look like? What is a boundary? We're going to talk about that today. He specializes in helping men make a transformation. Boundaries, I believe, apply to men and women. And he's back with us, our professional of the year, and our transformation coach is Joshua Long. Welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, glad to be here.
The boundary thing.
Topic.
Yeah, I'm loving it. It was an eye opener for me when I realized what boundaries needed to go up, and I believe it's a work in progress because every situation is different, every day is different. Like maybe you have your core boundaries, your values, whatever you want, your standards, whatever you want to call it. But then sometimes something will pop up. I'm like, oh wait, no, boundary up. What's your view of it?
Yeah, so boundaries for me, I think we're taught in this aspect of like set boundaries, set boundaries, set boundaries. And that's absolutely true if we're referencing back to like what we've spoke in the past. So about the core feminine, core masculine and balances. I think on the core feminine side, it is about setting boundaries and setting boundaries. But I think there's also a part of healing that we also have to understand coming from the core masculine. There's also a drawback of boundaries, if that makes sense.
How do you mean that?
So a lot of times those imbalanced core masculines can kind of what you would come across as too like stern or too blunt or too arrogant, because usually there's a lack of trust and a need for control on that side. So sometimes to where like what we know as in the mental health field, and healing journey, it's more or less we're promoting it from the imbalanced core feminine to set boundaries, which is absolutely completely true. But we don't actually give the attention that you can also have to work on drawing your boundaries back into more of a place of love and setting those boundaries. Because I always ask people, like, what is a boundary? So if I asked you, what would you say a boundary is?
I can tell you what some of my boundaries are, but
Okay.
I'll then to define what a boundary is, it's something that protects your values. And I think that's kind of it when I think about it. You have certain things that are important to you, and this you put up, and I use the
bumpers.
The bumpers, because it's like, that's your lane, stay in that lane. This is my lane. I don't want you coming over here. So I'm putting it up. Sometimes you have to put it up a little bit higher. But I think simply put, it's what you feel is important to you that you have to protect yourself from. And that doesn't mean that like you're being invaded with an attack or anything like that. It's just the way people treat you, and you believe that you should be treated a certain way.
I think that's key right there. It's the way you want to be treated and how you so boundaries are really the way we teach people how we want to be treated. And you mentioned like having values. You can have definitely, I think there's external boundaries with people outside of us, but there's also internal boundaries within ourselves that we have to, what I say, like to have authority in your life, you have to hold yourself accountable. So all a boundary really is accountability, whether that's with self or with other people. Now you mentioned like having values. There's non-negotiable boundaries, but boundaries also can come with compromise. I think that's to set the boundary and speak how you feel also allows the room for communication with an opposing person. So maybe the boundary in itself can't be met the way that you deliver it, but it allows the opportunity for the opposing person to actually come back and say, hey, like I can't do that, but what if I can do this? So then that's where you're putting it on the table to have open communication to come to an agreement and a compromise that allows both parties to feel respected.
Fair enough. Because you don't want to be in that situation either where something happens and you're like, no, I'm not having it. That's it. That's it. Go away. That's it. It's a compromise, right? I'm not doing that, but I'm okay with this. Let's
Mm.
talk about it. What are you okay with? Let's work on it. Let's work on it together. Um, do you feel that even before you decide what your boundaries are, that you really have to define you? Like
Yeah.
even write it down. Take it, as an exercise, take a pen and physically write it down. We talked about how impactful and important it is, scientifically proven that when you write it down, the connection is powerful as opposed to typing it. And just what am I about? What
Mhm.
what is important to me? I did that, and three things came out of it. Maybe part of my values, and I didn't make this up. As I was doing this, it just showed up in a post. And some people attribute it to Shakespeare. Some people attribute it to Bob Marley. But essentially, for me, it is love everyone, trust few, key point, and always do the right thing for the greater good. We can all do the right thing for ourselves, but
All right. That's
for
easy.
everybody. Right, exactly. So I'm kind of piloted by that. That's kind of a baseline for me in terms of the boundaries. Um, and I don't like call people out on the trust thing. I just sit back and watch. They just observe and you see who is who and what is what.
Yeah. And I think a big struggle, like you mentioned, is sometimes we don't know our boundaries.
Yeah.
When you, like you said, you really got to know yourself. And so boundaries are actually, it's really a process of elimination, trial and error as you go through life. So don't put the pressure on yourself to know, like, I got to know my boundaries. Because some people, when you ask them, they're like, I don't even know what my boundaries are. But that's because there is a lack of connection to self. Um, so it really helps. So like as you start going through the healing journey, a way to like discover your boundaries and find out what they are is through just experience. And I always tell people, if you say a friend calls you and says, "Hey, I need help moving," and you're in the middle of doing something, but you come from that imbalanced, core feminine, you just say yes, you people please, and you're like, okay, got to go help my friend. Now, with each situation, no matter what it is, as you leave that situation, be aware of how the voice in your head, what it's saying. Is it walking away from the situation saying, I wish I never did that? Oh, I really had to get this done. Oh, they never do anything for me. So if there's an attached feeling after a behavior that you present to the world, then that tells you that there's a boundary, and that's a way that you can learn yourself. So the next time a friend calls and asks for your help, you now have to sit and get quiet with yourself and be honest with yourself. Do I really want to do this? And
Hmm.
then that's how you kind of learn yourself. Because if you can go and do it and there's no attached feeling, then it's authentic. If you have an attached feeling, you need to set a boundary around that. And that through behaviors and situations in life, you can start to learn what you actually do like or don't like, and being honest with yourself.
I like that you said that you have to sit with it. You
Yeah.
really have to process it because that's where a lot of us go wrong. Somebody does something and right away triggered.
Mhm.
And that's where I've learned I just lean back on it. Something happened 2 days ago in my world, not a big deal, but somebody said to me, "Can you believe what they did? That what they did to you, meaning me?" I'm like, "It's nothing. I don't care. It's okay. It's fine. They're doing their thing, but it's perfectly fine." And I really mean that. They're living their life by their way, and I'm doing mine. It's absolutely okay. But in the past, I might have looked at a situation and done just that. Oh my gosh, what's going on? And emotions come into play, and you need to process it. But
Mhm.
once you know where your boundaries are, it's much easier to get a instant reference point. Your GPS, really knowing
Yeah.
what your GPS is.
Yeah, and it's also a way, it's also daunting, because as you go on these healing journeys, we all know that you lose people. So in this process of setting your boundary, it can be very scary for someone that has always been a people pleaser or just codependent, because there's a fear you're going to recognize to stand up and speak and honor yourself. You're going to feel fear around, they'll never talk to me again. They're going to judge me. They're going to think I think I'm better than them. And so it is, boundaries are very challenging, but I always tell people, if you accept and fill yourself up on this journey, you look at what the worst case scenario should be. And when you can truly accept that, then you can be at peace with it, because boundaries are a great way to really find the people in your life that you should invest in, because the right people will honor your boundary. Those that get defensive and make you feel guilty for standing in your truth aren't the people you necessarily want to invest in anyways. So there's a lot of pros, scary, but benefits, more benefits than anything, but it's changing that thought pattern that's rooted in that fear of speaking your own truth.
Hmm. And thank you for bringing up that up, because that's really paramount, because we may lower our boundaries for that reason, where you don't want to tick somebody off, where you're, kind of riding the fence with somebody, but it's not aligning with you, but you're just kind of riding it a little bit, as opposed to just saying, that doesn't support me. That really needs to go. That's just not, it's not right. We all know inside
Oh yeah.
what's right and what's not for us.
Well, I love that you said we all know, because that's what I say. That's your knowing, deep in. But what are the thoughts that aren't allowing you to honor that, and you're abandoning yourself? And that's that warfare inside of us, that light and dark. It's literally the devil and the angel on your shoulder. Your angel's like, no, your truth, but the devil's like, oh no, but if I stand in my truth, no one's going to like me. I'm going to be judged. People are
Right.
going to think I'm arrogant. People's going to think I'm selfish. But you got to beat that voice. And that's the challenge.
Mm.
Walking
And that voice is saying, just let it go this time. Just say it's going to be,
right.
it's
If
not
they do it
that big a
again, I'll say
deal.
something. If they
Right.
do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally true.
If it happens again, then we'll confront it. Okay. We fair with
Right.
that. And the angel's like, no,
Mhm.
that's not who you are. And let's start the shadow work, the healing now. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
No, but it's too afraid. I'm not. Yeah, totally true. It is a daunting task. Do you
Mhm.
feel that once you start standing up for yourself, and I don't necessarily mean in front of other people, I mean standing up for yourself within yourself, that it gets easier?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, if you just think about like facing like any kind of fear. Because I always say, if there's a fear, that's resentment and something's pushing you away. But if you walk into the resistance, it's guaranteed liberation on the other side. Now, it may not be the magnitude, but there's going to be a growth with each time. And as you do it, it becomes more comfortable, and less daunting. And I always think to myself, like, there's people out there that always set boundaries and they still got friends, Like, why can't I? Why am I any different? But I would
Well,
definitely think it's
yeah.
easy.
And I guess it's patience too, because let's say you put boundaries up, some people kind of got pushed to the side. Maybe you didn't eliminate them, but you're keeping your distance in some regard. Um, we want other people to show up and replace them right away. Not going
Hmm.
to happen, because as I'm learning, your vibration gets raised as you put up your boundary,
Hmm.
and higher vibration attracts higher vibration. And those will eventually be attracted to you because of that. But like, to your point, when you said it a second ago, I had a visual of where you said on the other side, walking through a fire.
Hmm.
You got to walk through the fire. It's going to be hot, it may burn a little bit, but once you get to the other side, it's going to be cool, and it's going to be cool. So, but you got to get there, but you have to take the step to go through the fire.
Hmm. And each time you're actually building, like we spoke about, inner child. So realistically, that's just a need that needs to be met from that inner child. So each time that you honor it with a boundary, that inner child internally is praising. So you're filling yourself up with self-love. And that's why it kind of gets easier. So where you like start here with no boundaries and no self-love, you grow with like as you're setting boundaries, you're also honoring self, which is encouraging your confidence, your self-esteem, because that inner child's need, you're honoring that your inner child's needs.
Hmm.
And your soul, which is your inner child, is thankful for that and has gratitude for that. And that's where it becomes empowering.
Give me two of your boundaries.
Two of my boundaries.
Yeah. Can we do that?
Um, two of my boundaries. Gosh, on the spot. I would say one of my like non-negotiables for like within me is like people that like I have a boundary that you have to tell me kind of how you feel. Like I don't like when people kind of use passive aggressiveness. And so a lot of my friends, like I'll call them out on being passive aggressive because I find that there's a lot of, yes, I set the boundary around it, but I also, people need permission to speak their truth because we all have this fear of honoring ourselves. So after I give somebody permission to really speak their truth, if I feel like I have to kind of navigate around a passive aggressive person, I'll kind of well, I'll let them know first off if it's somebody that I want to like invest in. Now, if this is just someone on in my everyday passing, I don't put as much pressure. But it's that question of like, is this a relationship that needs investment or it's just in passing? But if it is a relationship that I'm considering investment in, that has to be something that we clearly have. So I'm very strict on clear communication and emotional maturity. So I would say that's one. I have a boundary with my family that like when I go back home, I give like each one of my nephews, because I used to be the one that just hopped around to all my family's homes and staying, but I realized I was driving myself crazy. So an internal boundary that I have when I go home is like I give my nieces and nephews, that my brother and my sisters, they each get one night. I'll go like stay with them because they always want Uncle Josh to come stay with them. But other than that, I've set a boundary within myself that I get my own hotel. And so that's an internal boundary because I know like I was feeling overwhelmed and everything when I would go home trying to bounce around and see everybody.
You need an escape.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta honor
That's it.
yourself. It's not normal to just give all of yourself. It's exhausting energetically. You're just drained.
Yes. And you know, that brings me to a boundary that I set a couple of months ago where, and I'm an empath. I don't want to admit it. Honestly, I don't want to admit it. I took a test recently and it came back as my number two strength. Number one was communication. Duh, okay. Number two was empathy.
Hmm.
And I kind of knew it was up there, but not number two. But anyway, but just what you said, people draining you. I left here, had another meeting coming up. There's an airport, tiny airport, like a minute away, 2 minutes away. Got something to eat. I'm sitting there. There's just, cool watching the planes and just wanted to get away. Phone rings. Somebody's got a problem. Somebody's got another problem. Somebody's got a problem. I'm like, and it was that moment I had an epiphany where I was like, I'm not giving of myself at certain times. I'm shutting it down. Unless it's an emergency, I'm not doing it. Everybody's got this going on, that going on. I put the phone down. So that was a boundary that I put up. And honesty,
Hmm.
honesty. It's a big thing for me. It's a big thing for me. Um, if I detect any dishonesty, boundaries start going up. If
I
somebody's not
like that.
being 100% genuine, and that some people, hide behind things, and I get it. But that's definitely a game changer for me. And you know what? That's based on experience. That's all.
Yeah,
We learn.
it is.
It's essentially boundaries based on experience.
Um, elaborate. Like in what sense?
Things you've gone through that makes
Okay.
you realize that you need to put a boundary up. I don't know necessarily that you would just define a boundary unless you had a reason to based on an experience.
Yeah, so I guess that goes back to like that trial and error of through life, through experiences.
Sure.
Uh, you can figure yourself out and figure out what your boundaries are. Now, I will say that there's also some boundary. I don't know that I'd call them boundaries or fears. So I guess, I mean, I like this question because now you're making my brain think. How we show up from, like we've spoke about traumas. We may show up and we are looking at it as it's a boundary. But is it a boundary or is it coming from a place of fear?
Fear. Hmm.
A boundary is conscious, a fear is subconscious. So like we always reference relationships, but I think people just relate to relationships the most. So it's like all these people that like someone hurt you in your past, someone did something. And so and you take that on to your next relationship, you're calling it a boundary, that like, I don't tolerate this, I don't tolerate this. But is it actually that person did something, or what you think they did is just triggering a trauma? So is it a boundary or is it a trigger?
Well put, well taken. And what I'm saying in terms of honesty, that's based on experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe I look at it in a different way, whereby somebody did something that was dishonest to me, but they already revealed that they had an air of dishonesty in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pick up on it. I saw it, I knew it, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
pick up on it. Fast forward a bunch of time, something else presents itself, then something else presents itself. Um, Side note, should have listened to it. People always show you who they are in the beginning. That's not my belief. Um, but I let it go. So I didn't put up a boundary.
Right. So
So I
that
get
to me is saying, now I gotta.
right. And and I get what you're saying about fear. And I did process it for a second, like it was a trigger. Like, am I doing that because of fear of somebody not being honest? But no, if you're not honest, we're good.
Right.
But
Oh, I think that's the difference. You said there was signs.
well, in this situation,
Oh,
there were, and
right. You
I
ignore
let
the red
them,
flag.
I let them go. I didn't think it was a big a deal, but it turned into be a bigger deal. So now I don't look for it, but when it presents itself, it's like, all right, duly noted. Somebody may not be as honest as they thought they would be, and yeah, now I'm put a boundary up. And then if there's reason to believe that there's more in terms of their honesty, the boundary might go even higher. And then we get to a point where it's like not dealing with that anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we also have to give people the grace. We
sure,
can't be so strict of, I see this boundary cut off. Um, you see something, I almost feel like, especially when you're changing, like myself, 30 years of just being like what I thought was who I was.
sure,
Um, and then you go to change yourself because we've taught people. So we have to take some accountability for like, over all these years, I've taught this person and allowed them to treat me like this. So they think it's okay. And now I'm coming in and completely changing it. Yeah, we have that right. But at the same time, you got to have grace and
hmm,
understand they got to relearn you.
yep,
And so just because you see something, don't just say like, I have a boundary, I'm cutting them off immediately. Then
sure.
you're doing yourself an injustice, and you're also not taking an opportunity to the opposing person for them to have an opportunity to grow. So even though you may see it, you should always go to them and speak of how it's making you feel first,
Yep.
because they might be the type that is willing to honor your boundary, and that you don't actually have to let go of that relationship, but you can build that relationship instead of running.
And if they act like they really don't care and that's their agenda, then now you know.
Now
Now
you
you
know,
know. Yeah,
but you
uh,
gave them benefit of the doubt.
exactly. Yeah. Great talk today. This is
Yeah.
I've talked about boundaries before, but never down in this deep.
Yeah, I think a lot of boundaries is one of those words we think it's like, oh, just set a boundary, but there's so much depth and process and
Oh,
to
especially
that.
when it comes from the child in you.
Hmm.
And and you have to consider where the boundary is coming from. Uh, you always have great advice, Josh. How do we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all social platforms at Coach Joshua Long, or you can send me an email at transformation@joshualongcoaching.com, or just go visit my website at www.joshualongcoaching.com.
Cool. Thank you for today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.